today, let me just explain the title a little bit. I was listening to a seminar a few months ago with a very prominent longevity medicine doctor, and he was talking about these people in the world that live much longer than most. And these are the clusters of people in the world that can live to 100 or more. And you may have heard of them. These are the people that live in the blue zones. And I was really quite surprised to hear that these people actually are not saints. They do live, and there's things that we can learn from them that might help them live a longer life. But they're not perfect. And so what the speaker was saying is that they somehow have managed to dodge bullets. And what ends up happening is they still succumb to the health conditions that ultimately take our lives. But they somehow manage to waylay that for an additional 20 years. And so this idea that we could actually dodge bullets, I thought was fantastic. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. How do we do this? My interests really do lie, if I think about what I'm most interested and most passionate, is I like to help people optimize their health. And if their health can be optimized, then there's a good chance that their lifespan could also be extended. I have been interested in research and science and have trained as a consultant dietitian. But then in the last 5 or 6 years, my interests have really moved into this applied science of longevity medicine. And that encompasses so much more than just nutrition. And I'll talk about that later on today. But I'm interested in helping people improve and change their body composition and their weight, because there's health benefits to losing body fat and gaining lean muscle, and in some circumstances to lose weight or gain weight. I'm very, very interested in how we preserve the health of our brain and our cognition, and also physically what our bodies are like. And then there is all these other things that a dietitian learns. The psychology of food and how people approach food and the food addictions that people may have. Gastrointestinal health issues such as reflux and inflammatory bowel disease and irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis. There is a host of digestive diseases that somebody like myself can help people with. And then the lovely part of actually helping people through conception and pregnancy and how they feed their child and nurture themselves after a pregnancy. So the breadth of my interests are very wide, but today I'll really be talking about this idea of how do we negotiate our way to a healthier and longer life, both for us and our families. So in order to do that, I do want to explain a topic that I think is very important. And this is this concept of health span. And this graph, this table actually shows it quite well. What we can actually expect, and Singaporeans are very fortunate to actually live in a very clean, healthy environment and live to a very, very long age. Singapore is one of the few countries that has a very good life expectancy. But really, how a life plays out is we are all quite bulletproof as we are young. And then as time passes, chronic health conditions slowly find their way in. And so the period of our life where we are healthy can slowly start to erode, and we start to move towards that period of ill health. And then obviously we then succumb to these conditions. The idea of health span is how long can we extend that period of health in our life, and how can we compress that end period where we are not so well. And by doing that, we can actually give ourselves an extra 10 or 15 or 20 years of very, very high quality life. And that is immeasurable as far as I'm concerned, and it's in its value and what we can have from this. But then there's this interesting thought, is that if you're able to have a nice long health span, will you also live a little bit longer? And if we listen to what scientists are saying, is our health expectancy at the moment is actually in the mid-80s, and I'll talk a little bit later as to what I believe is possible. But they're already saying that there's this step up, and that in the not too distant future, we could all be thinking that our life expectancy is up to 115 years of age. And that's, again, another big jump. But what would be disastrous is to live a longer, unhealthier life. And so we want to extend that period of our lives that is our health span. So let's think about this in a more global manner, okay, of our own bodies. What do I think is the fundamentals of our health span and extending our health span? So the first one is, as I was discussing with these people that live in the blue zones. If you are fortunate enough to get through your 20s and survive, the motorcycle accidents, the car accidents, the avoiding work injuries and social or holiday injuries that may take our lives too soon, or being in a position where we have the mental strength to stay alive. What is it that ultimately takes us? Well, what actually it is cardiovascular disease, so stroke and hypertension. It's diabetes, it's neurodegenerative disease, dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and cancer. If we really want to bundle it, these are the four big players that will ultimately take and erode our health and will take our lives. So if we want to live a long, healthy life, we want to do what the people in the blue zones do, and we want to delay the onset of chronic disease. We also have been given one body to live in. And for people who have owned a bicycle or a motorcycle or a car, it doesn't matter how long you look after them for, you trade them in, and Singapore makes you trade them in anyway after 10 years. So you turn them over, but think of the things that you own that you've had since you were a child and you're going to keep for your entire life. Very, very difficult to think of a single thing, maybe a watch. So, but we have to live in our bodies for this whole time. And so again, if we're thinking for the future, your physical body and your physical capabilities have to be thought of in addition with the idea of delaying the onset of our health conditions. And then the last part is, what do? We carry our body and we carry our health, but what is the central controller? It's our mind. And so we want to be there for it. And so we have our cognition, preserving our beautiful brains, looking after our bodies, and waylaying the onset of chronic health. They're the fundamentals. So let's talk about them in more detail. So as I said, we want to delay cardiovascular disease and diabetes and dementia, Alzheimer's disease, cancer. What do we know about that? We have a huge amount of knowledge on this front with at least some of these health conditions. So what we want is, you want to know where your status is, and the older you become, the more we want to know, where am I at on the front on all of these conditions? Because what you know, you can track, and what you know you can do something about. Now, maybe when you are 20 years old, it might not be of interest to you, but actually, I would say that it should. And I'll explain that in a moment. And parents that I'm talking to, grandparents that I'm talking to, is to use the wisdom that you have to perhaps talk to the younger generations and actually have them doing and thinking about the things that I'm about to say. But let's talk with heart disease. Just as an example, okay, we know a lot about our hearts, and we have a lot of blood tests that we can do in order to track what the health of your heart is. And here in Singapore, there are standard blood tests, but every year, 5 years, 10 years, research is actually nuancing the tests that we have. And if you have somebody that's knowledgeable in this field, we can actually learn more and more and more about our heart health, more than just some of the standard tests that are out there. And up until our age of about 40 or so, that's probably adequate. But then we can do more than that, because with the heart, we can look at it and you can have scans and you can do echo tests and stress tests and coronary artery scores and scans, and you can physically see the status and the health of your heart. And so these are things that we have available to us. With diabetes, we also can look with careful blood testing, and you can look and see whereabouts you are along the road towards diabetes through simple blood tests. With respect to Alzheimer's disease and cancer, we don't know nearly as much, but there are certainly some things that that we can do, and I'll mention. We know and can just physically look at our bodies, because as I said, we need to be thinking about our bodies as well. And so with respect to our body composition, we want to know how much body fat we have, because the truth of the matter is that heart disease, diabetes, dementia, cancer all have a very, very strong link to the amount of body fat that we carry. So it is good to know where you are along that spectrum of body fat. And it can be as advanced as getting scans to know the entire composition of your body, and it can be right down to your body weight and taking a waist measure, but knowing those numbers, it's very important. We can look at genetic screening. You can get tests now and mouth swabs, and you can look and see what DNA you have. And with respect to chronic diseases, there are some genes that we know about that you may be interested in knowing whether you have or not. There is an ApoE gene that tells you your risk for Alzheimer's disease. There's a BRCA gene that will tell us risks for breast cancer, and there are a few others. So we have access to this. And then we also, if you want to be knowledgeable, which we want to be knowledgeable, is to know risk factors. We have risk factors for these health conditions, some of which we can't modify. There's higher risk of heart disease by being a male. Well, I can't do anything about that. But then there's all these modifiable risk factors for all of these health conditions. And if we look at nothing other than cancer, don't smoke, because the risks for cancer and smoking are sky high. But if we only use cancer, the next one is carrying extra body fat. And then there are so many others. So again, if you have a family history of heart disease, if you have a family history of diabetes, if you have a history of Alzheimer's disease in your family, know your status and know your risks, because it's 2021 and there is a lot of information that we have. So that's that first. Second is, as I said, we need to preserve our physical health. What I mean by that is, how do you get through your life so that your body can hold you up to take you through all of these different years that we have. How do we make sure that we avoid injury, minimize injury, manage the injuries that we already have? If I could go back in time, my daughters keep asking me that question. I would go back to the times where I did some terrible things to my shoulder, and I wish I had changed that circumstance. But now I have to look after my shoulder and make sure that I can carry this shoulder with me for the remainder of my life. We have these highlighted times in our life where we need to be even more careful. If you're a male and you're 50 years of age or over, we start to lose muscle mass, and we need our muscle mass for a whole host of reasons. With women, but also with men, the risks for osteoporosis really start to increase from 50 years onwards. I don't need to say so much to explain how important it is that we need to preserve our physical health. But a really interesting way to think about this, and it's the way I've been thinking now for quite some years, is this idea of the Centenarian Olympics. What would you like to be doing when you're 100 years old or 90 years old or 80 years old? What do you physically want? And so I'll use myself as an example. At 80 years old, I would love the idea that I can still go ocean swimming. I like the idea that my grandchildren I will be able to go down onto the floor and pick my grandchildren up and to live life down on their level. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to be able to get up off the floor. I'm going to have to be able to, position myself in and around. I want to be able to travel when I'm in my 80s. And if that means having to hop on a Shinkansen in Japan, I might need to get to that train quite fast and pick my bags up and be able to move quite quickly. I would like to be able to do that. So in order for me to compete in the Centenarian Olympics, I now have to think about the things that I need to be doing. And so going forward and then working backwards is a really interesting way to start thinking about your body. And then, as I said, we need to protect our mental health and our well-being. We need to have the tools to be able to manage stress and de-stress. To live as we get older in despair or uncontrolled depression or anxiety or extreme loneliness. If you've got the physical capabilities and your health is good, but your mental health is really compromised, it's going to be a very, very unhappy existence, and we need these tools. I think as we get older, to be able to be in a place where we are able to accept change and to have an open curiosity and an engagement for what is about to come and what is our world like is really important. And then something that I've been reading about and very interesting is, what place do we take as we get older? In, I think, Singaporean culture, as we get older, I think is actually quite wonderful, is that the older generations are actually considered to be wise. And in my culture, that's not necessarily the case. But to be this concept of becoming a modern elder, and that we have wisdom and that people are interested in this wisdom, I think this is something very interesting. And to have good mental well-being on that front, I think is something that we need to consider. So what tools do we have to play with? So as in my profession and what I do, this is my toolkit. So if you want to extend your health span and live a longer, healthier life, these are the tools that we all have at our disposal. Our nutrition, our sleep, our mental health, There's a mistake there. Exercise and our physical capabilities. Our hormones change as we get older. We need to understand our whole hormones. And in fact, there are things that we can do with all of the points above to actually manipulate our hormones in order to preserve our health. We can't change our genes, but we can know what our disposition is. But we can actually influence our genes with this new world of something called epigenetics. And the more we understand about epigenetics and aging, I think this is where researchers will actually be able to slow down our aging process and treat aging as even like a disease and work out how to slow it down. So epigenetics is something that is a new burdening, a new field that's emerging in this world of longevity research. And then, of course, we have medications and TCM and supplementation, and these do have a significant impact on our health conditions. We know that statins save lives, for example. Medications are extremely important, but these are the levers that we have. So let's talk about some of these levers in a little more detail. So first, nutrition. And in fact, I've got to say, I always try to think, which one should I be talking about first? Is sleep more important? Is exercise more important? Is nutrition more important? Well, I've spent 20 years talking about nutrition. Let me talk about it. But they are all intricately interwoven with one another. I could pick any one of those top three, and I think anyone could be justified as being one of the most important. But let's talk about nutrition first. And remember, thinking in the lens of what can nutrition do to help me delay chronic health conditions? What can nutrition do to ensure that my mind is preserved? What can nutrition do to help me preserve my physical capabilities and my function? So at some point, it is really interesting and probably important to actually think about what it is that you're eating and start to tailor your diet according to your health and lifestyle requirements. If you have started to develop symptoms of heart disease, you want to eat in a heart-healthy manner. If your blood sugar levels are higher and you're now taking metformin, do you just take metformin, or do you start to look at your eating patterns? How can you eat to preserve your brain? What should you be eating in order to be able to do the physical exercise that you've now committed to doing? We need to tailor our diet according to our health. There are 101 different health gurus. Every single type of eating pattern, there's going to be somebody that is going to tell you that you should be on a carnivore diet. It should be plant-based. No, you should be a pescatarian. Actually, I've got this fantastic juice detox, and for $500, I've got some fantastic pills that you should be having. Our nutrition is extremely important. And so my advice, follow the science, don't follow the fads. Be savvy and think before jumping in to just any old type of eating, okay? Again, looking at that idea of health conditions and physical capabilities and mental health, how you choose to eat can have an incredible impact on your body composition. Yes, I know you need to exercise, but if you're over-consuming, under-consuming, eating the wrong things, you might be not fueling yourself for the exercise that you should be doing. You might be putting on unnecessary amounts of body fat. And of all of the things that we can do to manipulate our weight and our body fat, exercise will take us only so far. How you choose to eat will take you most of the way. And as I said, how we eat helps us fuel our body, and food is fuel. And there is such an emerging world of how should I be eating in order to maximize my physical capabilities. And then We all know how food can have an impact on how we feel. There are emotional eaters, there's stress eaters, there's anxiety not eaters. How we choose to eat has an incredible impact on how we think and how we feel. So under those three fundamentals, nutrition, you can see here, is an absolute pillar. So let's dig in a little bit further on with respect to nutrition. You need to know what to eat. You need to know how much to eat. And in fact, now we need to know when to eat. Okay, so with the what to eat, it goes back to what I've just said. We need to pick an appropriate eating style. And the ones that I'm finding, let me just talk about new research. One of the healthiest eating patterns that has come to date in 2020 was a predominantly plant-based eating style with some fish and seafood that is done in a manner that is time restricted. That seems to be the gold standard. But then I'm being constantly bombarded with people saying, is keto actually the most fantastic eating pattern? And if you have a risk factor towards brain and cognition and dementia, it may well be the case. So as I said, you need to pick an appropriate eating style. And like I said also prior, how much to eat. Knowing what food has a certain amount of calorie and what type of food can you overconsume, and you overconsume it, but you actually keep on eating. The food marketeers are very, very good at that, at being able to target the exact kind of food that you're going to be able to eat plenty of and come back for more. You need to know these things. And then 5 years ago, nobody was talking about how we time our food, but now we're understanding so much about the best time of the day to eat, and whether you start to use time restricted eating to regulate the number of calories that you have, or how you choose to eat and the timing of how you eat might actually help you if you've got symptoms of reflux. So many different things. So within the banner of nutrition, you now have these other three levers that you can pull. How much, when, and what. Very, very important. So if we move down to sleep, and we look at it again, thinking about sleep with respect to delaying those health conditions and our mood and physical capabilities. We know that if you are sleep deprived, your risks of heart disease go up significantly. Shift workers have a much higher risk of heart disease and heart attack than non-shift workers. That we know that when you sleep, our blood pressure actually resets. We also know that just 2 or 3 nights of poor sleep can raise your blood sugar levels to that of somebody who has insulin resistance. There's the link between sleep and brain health is just growing. We now know, and I've talked about this in other seminars, that when you sleep, and the longer you sleep, our brains actually shrink a little bit, and this fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, bathes all through the brain and clears a whole lot of metabolic waste that has occurred through the course of the day. And that what's called glymphatic draining might be linked with preserving our brain from Alzheimer's disease. So sleep and brain is so important. If you're sleep deprived, your immune system is compromised. If you wanted to have the best kind of drug to give yourself an advantage on the playing field, it's sleep. And we know that when we are tired, we can be drawn to the wrong kinds of food, and you only need to have 1 or 2 nights where you don't sleep well, and you know that you're going to get a little bit snappy, right? So sleep and mood are so intricately linked. And if we look at the science, the shorter you sleep, the shorter your life. So you want to live a longer, healthy life, think very carefully about your sleep and your sleep patterns. So what are some of the fundamentals? It's good to know your chronotype. You need to know what is your natural rhythm of sleep. And if you're in a fortunate enough position to be able to have some control over the time you go to bed and the time you wake up, at least with respect to work and your family, to know whether or not you're naturally a night owl, naturally somebody who could go to bed between 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, somebody who needs to go to bed early, but actually knowing what type you are will help you start to think about how you should be choosing to sleep. And then within that is starting to really bed down. What time do I go to bed? What time do I wake up? And if we look at sleep research, your bedtime and your wake up time really shouldn't be much more than about a 30 to 45 minute difference. So 7 o'clock to 7:45 a.m., 10 p.m. to 10:45 p.m., 7 days a week. We need to lock those points in. And then within that time, you want to be getting at least 7 hours of sleep that is as uninterrupted as possible. So what things do you need to do to reduce the number of interruptions in a night? And so as time passes, you need to fine-tune, not time-tune, sorry, slide, your sleeping habits. And in fact, it starts from the minute that you wake up in the day. What time did I wake up today? And in fact, your sleep sequence starts at that point. So having some idea of what your sleep cycle should be and what your sleep sequence should be is very important. And then exercise. The breadth and depth of the things that we can start to do with respect to exercise is just baffling me at the moment. But simple things. When you exercise, your cardiovascular fitness improves. And if your cardiovascular fitness improves, and heart health is our most important disease that we want to, heart disease is the most important disease that we want to prevent. Having some measure of cardiovascular fitness is extremely important. But we also want blood flow to the brain. It's very important. And so if we want to preserve our brains, we need to exercise and we need cardiovascular fitness. If again, going back to those health conditions, as we have the development of diabetes and higher blood sugar levels, if you can have more muscle bulk as you get older, that muscle bulk is a one-way ticket for blood sugar. And so you can regulate your blood sugar levels better by the body composition that you have. When we exercise, we put ourselves under some stress, but actually the type of stress and the long-term impact of that stress is actually good for our body and is good for our mood and improves our immune function. And then with respect to the bodies that we carry, the exercise helps us maintain or improve our bone mineral density. As I said, osteoporosis is something that we need to be thinking about. Muscle mass, sarcopenia in the over 50s, and that stability in the posture and how we move and the flexibility. These things, as I said, think about the centenarian Olympics. What is it that you need to be doing to be able to get up off the floor when you are 85 years old? And the research in longevity medicine would suggest that the most potent drug that we have to date to live longer is our exercise. So, lots of things. You can be extremely fit and not healthy. There are many, many people that push themselves on that exercise front and they are not in the least bit healthy. They're fit, but they're not healthy. So the difference between being fit and healthy are actually quite different. When you are younger, for example, or not even that young, you might be wanting to exercise in order to achieve something. I want to do a marathon. I want to be able to, walk this particular route or do some sort of 140 kilogram squat or something like that. So there's a point often in our lives where we might be exercising for performance. But I'm now interested in the idea of how do you exercise for life? How do you exercise for longevity? And so there are frameworks for that type of exercise. And it comes down to, again, these 4 sub-pillars or 4 sub-levers that you have access to. And the time that you devote towards exercise, we need to think about, number 1, what kind of exercise am I doing to promote stability? In order to be able to not have debilitating back pain and hip and knee and ankle issues, and to actually have a measure of stability with our body, you need to be doing the types of exercise that allows us to work that stability function. And then becoming frail, falling down and not being able to, and just kind of collapsing under the weight of a fall is unfortunately a very, very strong link to a considerable shortening of your life as we get older. We don't want to lose too much strength. And so the amount of lean muscle mass that we have on our body is an extremely important feature that we need to preserve. And as we get older, we need to preserve it even more so. So we need strength, we need stability, and we need the kinds of exercise to promote that. And then there is this type of exercise called aerobic efficiency. And this one is so important. And again, it comes down, actually, one way to look at it, it comes down to what new research is telling us about longevity. We have these in all our cells. The powerhouse of our cells are these things called mitochondria. Our mitochondria takes our fat and our carbohydrates and the oxygen that we take in to produce fuel. And our health conditions like diabetes and heart disease are actually embedded in all of this. They are diseases of altered metabolism. And so if we want to correct or, again, delay the onset of these diseases and delay the onset of aging, our mitochondria, we actually want them to function well. And so aerobic efficiency and a type of exercise that develops aerobic efficiency is something that becomes part of the suite of things that you do to exercise for life. And then there's this final type, which is this anaerobic peak. And as I said, let's say you are 80 years old and you want to make that sprint to the bus stop, that ability to move nice and quickly, the ability to pick up 2 heavy bags and to go up 3 flights of stairs and get to the top. That type of sprint type of exercise, at 20 years old, it might be how fast can I run 100 meters? But at 75 or 85 years old or 90 years old, it's how do I take those 4 very fast steps so that I step back and not get hit by that bus? So these are the framework for longevity exercise, and these are the ones that I'm very interested in. And then I'm not going to even begin to suggest that I am a master of this field, but with respect to mental health, it's an interesting way to look at it. But I read this very recently. The voice in our head, our inner voice, our inner dialogue, is our most influential coach on how we choose to live our lives than any other. And so in order to be able to live in a manner that allows us to get older and to embrace the changes that we have as we get older, we need to know that voice. And as I said, that voice can be both positive and negative. So we have a mental toolkit, and part of the reason why I am involved with the Brahm Center is because of the understanding of the power of mindfulness-based thinking in having an examined mind. If you know the way your mind works, and there are profound lessons to be learned through meditation and mindfulness, for example. So as in the toolkit, and if we talk from a Brahm perspective, it's actually one of the prime reasons why I'm here talking to you today, because from a personal perspective, the lessons that I have learned through understanding and practicing mindfulness have been profound. I also believe that having grit and resilience is very important with respect to our mental health from all ages. And as a parent, I'm trying to breed 2 children that have resilience and grit and are not children that are just treated in kid gloves. And I need to do that for myself as well. There are people that believe that if you have a purpose in life, then you're going to be strong and you're going to find a way to negotiate that path. And that's very true for many people and is something worth following. There are these concepts and philosophies of Stoicism. And again, there are many religious teachings that also teach grit and resilience and stoicism. And then something which I really like that I've been listening to lately is, again, part of that, the inner dialogue and the inner scorecard that we might keep is making sure or thinking about what's something called our personal credo, our core beliefs and the guiding principles that we can apply and the intentions that we have to integrate them into our everyday life. So actually living in a particular way is going to help us as we get older and to negotiate a longer, healthier life. So what can we think of? The longest living woman was a French woman. As you can see, she lived longer than the man. Longest living man died only in 2013. The people who live in the blue zones, as I said, no doubt have some very good health habits and dietary approaches and engaged lifestyle and exercise, the things that I've talked about. But they also have probably some very favorable genes that is also helping them along the way. As I said, they're not saints, yet they somehow managed to delay the onset of chronic disease. For most of us, we probably could live into our mid-90s in a very, very healthy manner and be and have that health span up until that point. And so that is achievable for most of us. And that scientists are suggesting that there really is something coming soon where our life expectancy may well be 115 years. But then we're also moving towards a time now where we have an aging population, and that's changing things. The idea of being retired at 60 or retired at 65 is a thing of the past. Okay, and back in Australia, people would retire at 55 and 60. At 55 years old, now you're pushing. At 60, you're still going. And I know here in Singapore, you also need to keep on staying up and working and doing things. The way we are aging is transforming and changing. So it is here and it's upon us. So the directions, as I've spoken to you about, we have a number of levers that we have. I truly believe that the early we all start to think about this, the better. Heart disease starts to show itself in our 20s. Diabetes shows itself in children now and early teenagers. And that was a health condition that used to be only seen in the 50s and above. And dementia starts, and Alzheimer's disease starts to develop, and this before 30 years before the symptoms first start to show. So we need to act early. We need to influence our children. We want to make sure our children are living in a manner that is going to help them dodge these bullets, and we need to dodge these bullets. And so thank you very much for listening to me today.